and also take the opportunity to ask Petra to join me up here on stage. I don't think that Petra really needs any introduction, but Petra Hielkema, chair of EIOPA, and a loyal guest of this conference. Thank you very much indeed for being with us again, both in your role in EIOPA, but also as the Fintech champion, is that the former title, of the IAIS? And we started by talking about AI and so on, but I think, again, Petra, just to start with, what is EIOPA doing at the moment, more generally, on this whole area of the interaction between technology and financial services, before we go into some issues in a bit more detail?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me again, and thank you for matching the colors as well. And it's a pleasure to be in person here today. We did this before online, but I'm happy to actually also see faces and have a bit more discussion. What is EIOPA doing? Well, we had a lot of working groups with the members. EIOPA is a member organization. We have 27 supervisors that together with me form the board, but below that there's a Christmas tree of working groups. And in many of the working groups was technology. But what we did last year is that we created a standing committee, which is below the board, but it has board members in it for digital finance. And there we grouped all the activities. And in that group, I think the first thing we do is definitely looking at AI. The insurance industry is very much about data. And so a lot what they do is about data, and AI is a logical tool there. And I sometimes feel that it's maybe not as much a buzz of how much innovation is there when you hear it from the industry, but it might also be a PR problem, because I think when it comes to data and AI, a lot is happening, and that means we also need to be on it as supervisors. So we of course follow the AI Act and provide input on drafting that is happening with the Commission. And for those who know a bit better how regulation works, when it comes from DG FISMA and guidance is needed, then EIOPA is asked to draft off on guidance. But the AI Act is from DG Connect, and so they draft the guidance themselves, but they ask for input, which is, I think, a positive. But we also develop guidance for supervisors, and of course it's also for the industry, but it's for our supervisors on how. And you see more and more with AI, it's much more about the how than about getting more rules. I think we have a lot of rules. So that's on AI. The other big project, of course, is DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act. The Digital Operational Resilience Act brings a lot, including a lot of work, and we're building the team. But what does it really do? It creates ICT risk management across the board. We do this with ESMA and EBA. It ensures that we have a classification of incidents so that we can respond to that. It does digital operational resilience testing, but moreover, it also is about the third parties that need to be identified now that DORA has come into force on the 17th of January. And we do that with a team that is really an EIOPA, EBA, ESMA team. We have one, Mark Andries, who's leading that team. We're currently hiring. One of the worries was, will we find the right people? So far, we see very good applications, and that is necessary. And what we will do this year is identify the critical third parties. So that is a big one that we need to work on. And then moving on, of course, VIDA. We're providing information on VIDA. We'll get to that later on. On crypto, we monitor crypto. We can monitor crypto because everything that is reported to national supervisors is also reported to EIOPA, so we can just go to our database. Not a lot is happening there, but we've started another round with all the positive news, just seeing who's picking up on that and starting to invest. But it's very low currently, and I see the same actually as the chair of the committee in Basel, the IAIS committee. We don't see that much happening, but let's keep monitoring. And maybe finally, we need to train our supervisors. So here we have, and we need to train EIOPA staff. So there's a lot invested in that.
Oh, thank you very much. And I think you touched on a lot of interesting things. It's interesting that Roberto Viola, the Director General of DG Connect, will speak at this conference later, touching on your point of the overlap. And I do say as a compliment, I know the Joint Committee has always done good work, but in DORA, I think it's been exceptional how you have worked together in a unified way. And Verena will speak a bit about that more later. But let's come to AI. What trends do you really see in the insurance sector in AI at the moment?
Yeah, so what we see is if we compare it to a survey we did in 2018 to 24, we see that there's more use of AI, 50% in non-life, 24% in life. It's still mostly back office driven, and I think Bruce, the previous speaker, already said that that's mostly to generate efficiency. However, we slowly see it moving to the front office, which means there is a contact also through AI with consumers that goes beyond the chatbot. And so here, there's positive examples actually. If you read our consumer trend report that we published 2 weeks ago, you will see that consumers actually rate very positive that, particularly for motor insurance, that actually through AI, the claims handling is much quicker. So there is a positive on that one. But clearly we also need to see what risks it brings. Underwriting, we also see that insurers use AI, but also satellite images, etc., to estimate risk, particularly when it comes to NatCat. We see that more and more developing. Definitely in sales and distribution, of course, who to reach, what client group to find. I think that there AI is an important tool as well. So I think for pricing, we don't yet see it that much, but I think we need to just keep an eye on that. And finally, with large language models coming, but generative AI coming, or agentic AI systems, the buzzword of today, I think they're all experimenting with that. They have in-house ChatGPT-like tools, but that are just in a closed circuit to keep the data. I think that is those developments we see. And I expect a lot more to happen, but we'll keep monitoring.
I mean, Bruce was talking about one of the potential being more personalized services.
Yeah.
FIDE will be a bit about that too. But how do you in the insurance sector manage the tension between more personalized services and the solidarity principle?
Yeah, and that is a key question. And I think it's not driven. It comes up a lot in the context of VIDA. I don't think it's VIDA driven. I think it's driven by the simple fact that we have a few developments. We first have a lot more data available. That's the one, and it can be shared easier through standardization and tools. We have more tools that can analyze that, and so the ability to know more about your client, a lot more, I think is growing. Meanwhile, the customers become more aware of the value of its data. We have GDPR, we have a consciousness, and here you really touch on the trust that also Bruce was referring to. So it's trusting that they really make good use of your data, that you are not the one that's left out. So this is a debate that is happening, and I think it should happen. And so I think if you go full to the end of that line, from having hardly any information on your client to having all the information on your client, I think if you as an insurer end up in the all information, it's no longer insurance, is it? It's hard because there has to be risk. So somewhere down that line you need to stop. That has to do not only with what is digitally possible. I heard redo what is possible digitally. I think you should also have a moral compass and wonder what is accepted in society. And I think that goes not at the speed of digital, although also society is moving. And I think you need to keep track on that. And what we see is that it really differs what kind of product you are selling, where people find it acceptable or not. And of course, the most emotional discussions are when you talk about health or life insurance related to health. So are you at fault if you have cancer and so you no longer can get a house? Is that fair? And so it's actually a political question about fairness. So how I see that going forward is that we need to talk about how far do we want to go per line of business, what is considered fair, and that should be a political decision. What do you accept as a society, and what do you do with the group that is then left out? Because there is this risk. In order to have this discussion, but also have the discussion in a balanced way, we created, and we're looking for volunteers, a group of experts, a consultative expert group. We did that 3 years ago, I think, or 4, where we had the ethical use of digital finance. We came up with principles. We want to do the same with the use of data. And I have 2 goals with that. First, support the thinking also on the fairness side, but at the same time also include the benefit of organizing losses in society through insurance. Because if the debate gets emotional, we sometimes forget that the fact that insurers actually pick up a lot of risk and few mutualization make it manageable is of real value to business and economy. And that is less in the discussion and needs to be brought in. So this is what we're working on. I hope to get to something by the end of the year.
Interesting. I mean, you talked about health insurance and life insurance. Those, not surprisingly, have been identified as potentially high-risk activities under the AI Act. We heard the Commissioner talk about possible guidelines. How do you see, where do you see the need for additional public policy intervention? What type of guidelines might we be talking about?
Yeah. So what I find here is of course a challenge, because if there was no AI Act, I would still be supervising AI because I have Solvency II. But now I also have an AI Act for life and health. So both industry and supervisors have to deal with both. Now, how do we do that? Now, the AI part, the positive side of having an AI board with an AI Act is that you're not just in the insurance sector looking at AI, you do it economy-wide. And that we are a highly regulated industry. And they created a subgroup under the AI board for financial services where we now work together. And they do listen to us when it comes to guidance. So where is guidance needed in the context of the AI Act, which is the entire economy? Depends a bit. I mean, we see identification also of and defining AI systems that are sometimes too broad for an insurance perspective. So there's models included in the definition, which to us are just a model, they're not AI. But there is an openness to discuss that. But for other parts of the economy where there is no regulation whatsoever, it makes sense. So that part of the guidance coming from DG Connect, and I'm sure the Commissioner can say more, is sometimes also necessary to make sure that we know what we mean. What is the scope? We know what then needs to happen and the how, and also how you can do that as a supervisor. I think that is highly relevant. What is also highly relevant for our industry is that member states make use of the option to leave the AI supervision to the regulator that already did it, which is the financial regulator. But member states are still deciding on that. On Solvency II then, and AI guidance, what is EIOPA doing for the rest? That's the next challenge. So what we do here is, and this is important, we will come out with a paper, guidance on opinion on AI, but it's really meant for the how. How do we supervise? This is not additional regulation, but you can imagine that if you say the law is principle based, so same rules, same risk, same regulation, we can do AI, that makes sense. And I truly believe that, also at the international level with the standards of the IAIS. But then the question, of course, still is, but then how do I deal with this? If I have this on my desk page, how as a supervisor can I deal with it? And we just try in the guidance that we give, but we hope for your feedback in the consultation to help supervisors understand what they look at, understand the risk, what they need to act on, but also what is okay, and try to do that as much aligned with what is coming out of the AI office. My ultimate goal is that if, as an insurer, you deal with supervision on AI, you don't notice whether it comes from the AI Act or Solvency II, because we keep it aligned to the extent possible. But this is how we deal with it.
It'd be interesting to see the draft guidance. Interesting. And how do you see the adoption of AI within the supervisory community?
Yeah, so let me start with my own organization, and then in the context of the Commission, it took a while because we have a lot of confidential data and you need something that you're comfortable with. But we have a tool now where we can actually also close everything outside and then put our own data and work on it. The moment we leave that screen, we lose the information. It's not saved anywhere. That's also good to keep in mind when you do that, because it's wet, it's really gone. But so in my office already, people for an outline of a speech, the minutes of a meeting, the briefings for my meetings, the summaries of papers, we can use an AI tool for that in our offices. And I often get already briefings where it says, Petra, this was enriched by AI or checked by AI. I like the rules that come with it, and I think many of you have it, but it's of course confidential data, ownership of data, copyright, but also don't copy paste from whatever the AI gave you. You cannot copy paste. You need to check if you agree with the content. And this one I love. You are not allowed to use the tool when you are in a rush. When you are under time pressure, don't use the tool. And it's really a rule. And I think that is, I think it's a good start. And I think it's helpful that in EIOPA, and I did myself the training over Christmas, so I could do it too, but that we start to work with this. So you move with what is happening, and maybe you feel more comfortable with what you look at. On the subtech side, we see more developments. We are working on a prep kit tool where we can just scrape the information from the internet and then are able to compare what we see. I hope we can work towards a tool where actually in our public consultations we can use an AI tool to do the first analysis. Often associations work at an EU level on a statement and then all send in the same, but that's a lot of reading. So if an AI tool can just get out the core and we have a message and we know what part of the market says that, I think we have a good start. Of course, the question is what are the individual topics? What are the individual comments? How can we not lose them? So that is a question too. We currently have another subtech tool starting now jointly. We have an open source space for my community where we share tools, but we now want to work on further actually improving the quality of data. I think in the end, it's always about the quality of data.
Yes. No, I was just thinking maybe I can develop an AI tool that helps fill in the consultations,
Yes,
and then you have a tool to analyze them, and that would make our life interesting. But anyway, moving to FIDE very briefly, I think the Commissioner gave a very strong continued commitment to FIDE and dispelled some doubts about its continued existence. How do you see FIDE? There's a lot of concern, of course, also in the insurance sector, many asking for the sector to be carved out or parts of the sector being carved out. That said, EIOPA was the first authority to have written on open finance. So how do you see this file evolve?
Yeah, so very honestly, FIDE won't go away. So for those who hope that it will go away, maybe, I don't think it will go away. I think there's a clear idea that if we enable better data sharing, it will result in better consumer outcomes. It's enabling legislation. Now, the problem with enabling legislation is that you do not really have concrete examples yet. It's a bit of a let's hope it works. I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with, again, some ideas, and I'm interested to follow up on what it could bring. But so far in EIOPA, we tried to get to a use case for open insurance, and we consulted on that, got a lot of feedback. Why? Because first of all, otherwise, if you are advising on regulation, it's completely hypothetical. So we needed something to look at and then say, okay, but if this is it, then we see these risks, we need this managed. That's why we build it. We're not going to build it for real. It's a paper use case, but it was very difficult to find one, frankly. So I think that is one. The indication of the difficulty of what data should be shared and is that clear enough? I don't think there's gray areas in VIDA, and it is essential that we make it very clear what it is, because this is where the trust of consumers comes in. How are my data treated? Are they treated fair? Are they safe? Cybersecurity. So I think all these questions are completely fair. And if we don't get that right, you do have a problem with trust. Now, the innovation, the thinking of innovation comes from a tech industry, which I think has a different feel sometimes than an insurance industry, but also a financial industry that knows that if the trust is out, you are in deep trouble and it's hard to get that back. It's not just a failure of a startup and we start the next one. No, it's a massive impact if you lose trust. So getting that right is essential. So things like, what will it really bring given the costs that need to be made to get it done? At what speed can that be done? And I don't think we should move too fast on this. And also, is it really in a safe way with outcomes that are really beneficial to the consumer. Finally, the mutualization, that I do not link per se to Vida. I fully agree that that is a challenge. I go back to my previous comments, but this is, I think, a general problem or challenge or something to discuss in the time that we live.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think the challenge with FIDA is that it's conceptually fascinating,
Yeah.
but one does need some form of use cases to know who should sit at the table working out what the scheme is, what type of data is shared. It all remains a bit abstract. I always use the example of a pet insurance and brokerage for that, where the risks are low, but cross-border service might be interesting.
And it might be really good that the consumer knows what they share. They only share when they really want to. They can draw that back if they want to. That sounds great if you have that organized. But who is the consumer in an insurance policy? I mean, is that the one who did the contract? Is that the one who benefits from it? Is that the family that benefits? And then and then who actually gets to give the approval? And is that fair? So I think there's some questions. And indeed also on the basis of what do you then make that decision? And what is the data? A lot of data in insurance, which is intellectual property, is enriched. Sometimes also because people know the client. If you just get those data, you take a conclusion that can go really wrong. And again, and it's not even only about literacy, it's about understanding how important it is what you share, because there will be decisions based on it. And if I may, just a quick example, because I like to keep things lively, and then I always talk about my kids. But a week ago, I got a call from the teacher, and she needed serious talk with me. My son did a questionnaire on behavior, and the outcomes were very concerning. And they discussed it in the school, and there was also help, and there was a training he could do. And I said, whoa, but do you recognize that? Is there a teacher complaining? No, there's no teachers. They have no examples in the school. I said, well, I don't have examples at home. He said, yeah, no, but it came out of the test. And I said, great. Let's first talk about the test. He said, because he said it in the test. He said, let's talk to him. So I talked to him and said, listen, my dear son, teacher called and there was this questionnaire and it has some interesting outcomes. And he started to laugh. He said, I remember that one, Mom. Yeah, so it was right before the holidays on a Friday. I'm about to go home. Then she shows up, the teacher with the class. And we have to fill out 100 questions about something on how you act in the class. And you could only go home if you filled it out. So I ticked all the first boxes and I was out first. I said, okay, that was not very helpful, but it solves a lot. So sometimes, even if you understand what you have to do, but you don't feel that it's that important, you end up with crap. But if then the whole system starts to act on that, you need a human in the loop. This case, it was a mom.
Yeah.
But this is what we need to be careful of.
No, and I heard you could just the other day talk about bias in models because data is based on assumptions on gender and other things. So I love that example and will use it whenever anybody asks me to box tick in the future. Maybe one very last thought on the international dimension. How do we ensure more cooperation internationally through the IAIS and other bodies on these important issues?
Yeah, so what I see in the fintech form of the IAIS, and I really like my group, is and it's growing, particularly now because we do more on AI, is again, we come out with application guidance and we come out with operational resilience application guidance. So both are really to help supervisors on the how, and that is a result of a lot of sharing of information. I like our tour de tables. We share what we do, both in subtech, in practice, in supervision, also in regulation. And then we try to learn from that. We fully agree we do not need to change the standards, although some doubt starts to happen there, particularly on outsourcing. Is using a vendor AI, is that outsourcing or is that internal model approval? That is, I think, one of the questions where we start to really get more complicated discussions as supervisors. The technique is it's a model, it's internal, so you are fully responsible, or it's outsourcing, but if you outsource, you remain responsible. But how can you as an insurer be completely responsible for an AI that does deep learning or more, and then you are still responsible for the outcome, but someone has to be, or is then the AI responsible? So this is a bit of the depth of the supervisory dialogue. Do I see anytime soon that we will harmonize rules across the world? No. It's really still about sharing, about expertise, and about how we deal with it. But if you, as supervisors, really dive down in the risk, what do you have on your desk? What do I have on my desk? How do we deal with it? Then there's actually a very productive dialogue.
Thank you. I mean, you already raised one of the upcoming panels this afternoon about the new ecosystem and how tech companies and financial service companies work together. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure speaking to you. And I know why you're a champion of Fintech. Thank you. Thanks so much.